The SPY and the Qs both did something huge on Friday. They got this big bar right here that led up to that 50-day moving average crossing down on this daily MACD. So we're going to talk about the squeeze potential here as we are fighting this high. Now make sure to tune in and subscribe for Sunday's video as we will look at the shorter time frames. But if we do get some kind of squeeze, it seems we only have maybe 3 weeks left before something very, very bad comes around the corner. So we're going to be paying attention to this as we get into some technical analysis for the SPY, Qs, Apple, Tesla, Amazon, Nvda, AMD, and Meta going forward. And we're going to be looking at those weekly timeframes to see the signals that we are looking for if we get this big push here. But once again, make sure to subscribe because there is some weakness here. So some potential pullback could be coming, or maybe we just want to pull back in this zone to head higher. We'll get into that going forward. And first off, before we get into the SPY, I just wanted to let us look at a little video here because the Berkshire Hathaway conference is going on as of right now, the annual meeting, and we do have some people saying some interesting things about what Warren Buffett's sentiment is going on into the rest of the year. So you are about to watch a clip from John Rogers. Okay, John Rogers, he is the junior founder, chairman, co-CEO, and chief investment officer, lead portfolio manager for the Aapl Fund, and it seems he has some insight into what Warren Buffett's sentiment is and why he's making the moves he is, which is one thing, he was selling a lot of Apple in Q1. So let's go look at that clip real quick and we will react to it.
John, of course, Aapl Investments chairman and co-CEO. John, great to see you this morning.
Great to be here.
Just your quick first impression on the change in the Apple position, how it fits into what you're expecting in general out of Buffett this year.
Well, we all know Warren's very much of a long-term investor. Is always thinking long-term, but every once in a while he gets an idea that maybe the market's a little expensive. And I think we've had a long time without a recession. You're starting to see some consumer stocks having disappointing earnings. So maybe he's getting out ahead of that a little bit.
That's the first point I want to pause. So right here, we're seeing this guy right here telling us that Warren Buffett might have on his mind, hey, stocks are looking a little expensive at these prices, and he is looking for an opportunity at lower prices. That is something very key to understand here. The second part is he even mentions recession. So there is fear in Warren Buffett's head about some kind of recession that could be around the corner because we've been fighting it off for so long. And I believe that because we fought it off for so long, we could see a little bit worse of a recession, maybe even something worse than a recession being a depression. So we'll have to pay attention to that going forward, and then I'm going to play a little bit more of this so you can see some insight. Let's keep going.
Do you see it as a little more of a, portfolio manicuring to a degree as well? I mean, he had over 40% of the public securities portfolio is in one stock. I don't know. He seems willing to sort of hold things forever, even as they get big, but might have played into it.
Well, also, I would think the concerns around China and what's happening there. Tim Cook is a terrific CEO, but he can't control the geopolitical challenges that we're facing. And I know Warren's had some concerns about Chinese exposure, so that could be a part of it also.
We're going to stop there next and just say, okay, so not only are they bringing up recession, not only are they bringing up overextended pricing and looking for lower prices for stocks, but we're also mentioning China and geopolitical problems, which we've experienced in the last month or so. We've actually experienced this over the past few months. So let's pay attention to that as well. Not only are they mentioning recession, but they're also saying something geopolitically could affect the market at this point.
You mentioned, once in a while the market gets expensive. I wonder what your view is of Berkshire shares themselves at this level. It's like 1.5 times book value, sort of the upper end of a 15-year range or something like that. They bought back some in the quarter, maybe not a ton. What's your current take if you were talking about initiating or adding to a position of Berkshire?
I tell people all the time, just get started. It's like one of the best investments of all time. So there's never a bad time to buy Berkshire. But I think also at this time, maybe it is a little bit in the high end, so maybe you wouldn't go all in. You just do dollar cost averaging in building your position.
How long have...
And that is where I wanted to stop this and say the final point here. You have someone who is a big investor in Berkshire Hathaway, and we're seeing him say you could wait for lower prices, but obviously he is going to say, hey, it's great at any price because they have a huge position in this and they always want that to go up because it is good for them. So he's telling you, even in that statement right there, that there is a chance that we see lower prices for stocks across the board, including Berkshire Hathaway. So just pay attention to that, and let's get into some technical analysis with all of this in mind. Now, looking back at the SPY, just to remind you, we do have this green bar here. Now, a little bit of indecision up here as we do test the 50, but remember, we need to get above this point to have that chance for some kind of push higher, for some kind of short squeeze at this point, and we are there. Now, make sure to tune in for Sunday because the shorter time frames are saying we could get some kind of minor pullback or even a reversal, so we have to be open to both scenarios. Remember, we trade like water on this channel, so we are open to multiple scenarios. We are never too bearish or bullish. We are always just trading what is in front of us, and right now you have a crossing of the MACD to the upside, which has the potential to squeeze as we did get above this high right here. Now, we are still in our sell-off zone. I wanted to point that out. This zone here is very important to take back, and if we can see a big bullish bar above this, then we very well could see a new all-time high for the SPY. Now, we might need to digest for a moment before we head higher. We're going to get into that on Sunday. Right now, the daily chart, I just want you to see this right here. Now, if we switch over to the weekly, that's right, we're going to go into some weekly charts here. What are we noticing? Well, we're seeing some buying down here at that 20-week moving average. Okay, so what do we want to pay attention to with that? The signals here able to get rid of these divergences, and we have no divergences in the recent time here. So I just wanted to show you guys the all-time high back in the day, right? The all-time high back here in 2021, where we did see a choppy market, a choppy bearish market, choppy bear market, if you want to call it that. And what do we see at the top? Well, we see these little divergences, but it is a more downward divergence here. You notice that we actually come down a little bit more right here to create that divergence here, and then boom, it starts to head down. So something like this very well could be forming as of right now as we tested the 20-week moving average and we started to head up in some kind of squeeze, and then we struggled for a bit and that started to drop off. And we do get data and things like that throughout the next few weeks. Really, the market's going to be a little bit able to just go in whichever direction is chosen for the next week or two, because we don't get CPI or anything like that for a couple weeks. But I think CPI could come in as very important. And I wanted to show you this because this is where we truly had a downward direction. And that is the significance that we go over in the course, which is 149 for just today only. Okay, guys, so 149 for today only. If that changes, I'll let you guys know. But what can we notice here? Well, there is no divergence. Now, this is a very rapid, strong move, V-shaped recovery pretty much from this downturn. But is this an overreaction? Well, something we might want to see is something we saw over here. We break down to the 20-week moving average. We use that as support to head higher, and then we head higher for a few weeks, and that is ripped away. And I just want you to remember this. As far as the Patreon goes, if you want those weekly ranges, we're going to give those out on Sunday as well. So make sure you're subscribed and look into that as we talk about some kind of pullback. But these red lines up here, these thick red lines, are actually how far the options market expects the market to go either higher or lower. Okay, so this is the upside range for the entire year according to the options market. We could see some kind of reaction to something like 546. I don't want you to take that off the table, but I think once we do get above these yellow lines, which are the monthly for the month of May, we could see some kind of reaction up, get a small divergence, and see that ripped away over the next few weeks. So if this signal starts to prove itself, and if we are going to see some kind of squeeze, I really think that this will set up for us, and we're going to pay attention to that going forward, because once that does form, we can see more downward behavior like the last time. Qs on the daily, they are turning up on that MACD. We broke down, now we build back up. Now the cool part here is you can see the signal that we're pretty much looking for at the top up here. If we can create a top, we're seeing that to the bottom, right? So if you pull back just a little bit to where the downturn really stopped going down and wanted to go back up. Okay, what do we pay attention to? Weekly divergences here. We had weekly divergence down here that really mapped that out to base out, tell us that momentum to the downside was weak. And then we got some good news and boom, this thing starts to head up. And even if this was some kind of just momentum reaction, and then we dip down to find those buyers for the double bottom, and then we build up over time, it makes sense here. And we're looking for something like this to the other side. And the thing about the other side is most of the time the bullish side, right, stocks most of the time go up. So that just tells me, well, this could be a tight little divergence in here, but the key thing is we did dip lower. So if you come up like this on the MACD, we roll over, we would have a downward move here. And if this proves itself, we're going to mention it on this channel. We are going to mention it on this channel. You're going to be aware of it. Now, in the recent time, what is the difference between the Qs and the SPY? The Qs actually did have this flatness or downward move on the MACD and RSI at the same time. So that tells you this is going to be a little bit more dramatic. And I want you to notice how we actually sold off past the 20-week moving average for the Qs. Because this signal is here, that tells you the momentum is a little bit weaker for the Qs, and I should not be taking anything long above the price point of 439 or 440. This bar right here, actually right here, is going to be where we got that confirmation. You know that there is weakness right here, and we can pay attention to those shorter time frames. We did really well with this, and we even called this bounce. So we've done very well over the past few weeks. We called for that choppiness in March. We called for some kind of top in April, and now we're calling for maybe some kind of short squeeze that leads to a bigger top or some kind of double top coming in the month of May. So we may be going through some kind of positivity that experiences some kind of sell-off in May, and then people just start to go away. But the key thing here is we're also still in a channel. So if we do break down a little bit longer, we can see that reaction later. So we have to talk about both sides, because on the daily, and as we get into the shorter time frames on Sunday, we're going to notice there's no divergence down here or anything like that on the daily, but we are getting above the point that we needed to in order to see that squeeze. Now we're above that point. So now I believe if we're going to fully see that squeeze, we got to get out of our sell zone. This is still a sell-off zone. This is a zone that's very important. So if we're able to bust through that, then that could be a good sign for the market. That would be this MACD able to get into positive territory, and that would mean we're going to see an upward push for a little bit of time. We'll pay attention to any weakness in this move. As of right now, the shorter time frames, you're going to want to subscribe because it looks like we could get some kind of pullback, maybe to fill this gap, and then we turn right back around. So let's pay attention to this. If we are going to see this break down somewhat, over the next few weeks, well, then maybe we actually see some kind of divergence that we were leaning towards before this crossing. But as this MACD has crossed up, you have to say the direction here is pointing towards the upside. So we do have very good potential now that we beat this high for some kind of squeeze. And that's why we want to pay attention to the weekly signals. We want to see if we can have some kind of weekly divergence, which is exactly what we see at the tops, which is exactly what we see at the bottoms. And we're going to be talking about that when it comes to fruition. First of all, Apple, we're going to get into this a little bit, but overall, it's going to be, hey, this needs to curl down on the 30-minute and roll back up. We talk about that a lot when you see a big move. That 30-minute likes to get to the center line and then curl back up into positive territory. But the cool part here is we gapped above our sell zone above us, and then we went to the next one, and right as we hit it, we start to pull back. So we could be seeing some kind of move from Apple that gets down into this area, and then we see that reaction later on, giving us something up here, which would line up with the timeline, right? And then we have to talk about Nvda earnings and things like that. But on the weekly scale here, I just wanted to point this out. It looks like we could curl up on this MACD, so we could see a few weeks of positivity. And overall, I think that would look something like, we dip back down into this zone, maybe just the top of it. Then we see that buy back up over that week. Then the next week we come up and we get some kind of full retest. If you remember the thing about Apple, this thing was screaming weakness. It's still in negative territory. And if we actually reject with some kind of retest from this level, that might be where the SPY and the Qs are setting up some kind of divergence on the weekly scale. So we will be paying attention to this. I'm not thinking that the work is done at this point. If we are going to continue up for some time, we're going to have to change our thinking a little bit. But as of right now, this is what we can pay attention to, because this would hurt us if we take any kind of upside, because this would set up some kind of divergence on the SPY and the Q. So pay attention to that. But if Apple does curl up on this MACD here, well, what if it blows past these highs? Then we could be seeing a more extended move. Maybe we just want to react to the top of this trend line up here. We'll pay attention to that going forward. But really, in this scenario, I'm kind of leaning towards some kind of retest, and then we see some more selling come in towards the end of May. Tesla has been seeing some bullishness as well, and it never retested on the weekly scale. It never really retested this line right here, right? We had consolidation for quite some time. Ever since the all-time high back in November 2021, we never saw that. Now we're seeing an upward move. So what could we pay attention to? Well, first of all, on the daily, and we're going to go into that a little bit deeper on Sunday, this right here is a sell-off zone. We're almost there. We close back below the 20-week moving average, so we could see some kind of pullback and then see that head upward. But as of right now, you have to say, if this crosses up, I want to pay attention, because we could be getting some kind of retest. Maybe we go to a price point of 250 before we actually want to break down. Now, I'm just paying attention to this and then using that as in the back of my mind. Having the macro in your mind while you're trading is very, very good, because then you can see, oh, there is a daily divergence right here, and that could lead to the weekly turning back down. What's the thing about the weekly? If we see some kind of pop and that drops back down, what's going to happen here? negative territory. You take out the low and make a new one. So I just want to point that out. Even Warren Buffett himself saying, hey, I'm expecting these are pretty overextended to the upside, overpriced at this point. And I'm selling even a stock like Apple right now, even with that big push, talking about selling Apple still until we see those lower prices where he's more comfortable placing a buy. So pay attention to this. We could get some kind of upward move still as we are above that 180.92 we said was important. And look at that, closing right at 180.92. And we'll have to see, is that push going to last, or are we going to roll down on this MACD? Now, Tesla and Apple, these have been beat up for quite some time, so a big reaction is possible, but look for any kind of retest, especially as we test that 200. Amazon is one that's making me lean towards we might be going into a crash in May. And that's just because it's been tight for some time. We know the insiders were selling in here when we look at the daily and 2 hours. The insiders were selling in here. We looked at the SEC filings with Jeff Bezos. He was selling throughout this entire move. And we told you that there was little selling in every single upward push. They're selling. Now we start to break down. We hold up at the point we're paying attention to, 166.12. So what can we create right now? Well, we don't necessarily have divergence on the MACD and RSI at the same time. So what if we create that right now? A couple weeks of buying, what if we create some kind of divergence between these highs here? So that's what I'm paying attention to for Amazon. Seeing that same signal, just a little one is all you need to really break down from here, because you see the flatness of the RSI. Now you need that downward move, I think, to show you that weakness in the momentum. If we're going to continue higher, we're still paying attention to the daily signals. We're still paying attention to the 2 hour for those turnarounds, for those positive trends. So we're not saying it has to bust down, but it looks like the probabilities are leaning towards some kind of major top in the next few weeks. Nvda on the weekly scale, a little bit different, right? Nvda on the weekly scale, a little bit different because we only get one impression, red impression that is on the histogram. So this was able to cross, but what if that just goes the other way and then we see some kind of push towards 1,000, then that's ripped away after the earnings. So we'll have to pay attention to this. Remember, if Nvda gets that good news and people expect the earnings to be good, this could price in that good move from earnings. They could have a good print and still see that ripped away. Now we're going to be paying close attention to this. We won't be trading Nvda at all during earnings because we know that is a 50-50 flip and we are not going to do that, but we might bust out the coin, right? We've been busting out the coin for our 50-50 flips. So far, it's gotten one right. It has 24 hours to get the next one right, but it called Apple being bullish. Now we'll have to see if it gets that call right on Tesla, but don't read into the coin. It's literally a piece of metal flipping around so that you can have some fun on our live stream, which we're live every single morning. But what you want to pay attention to for Nvda, this is a big upward move. A divergence here with momentum would make total sense, and we see that on the RSI, maybe even the MACD with this small red print here. What if the MACD just pops up for a brief moment and pops back down, and then we get that divergence on the RSI that starts to turn down and cross the center line? So really, what you're looking for on the weekly scale as well for Nvda is a crossing below the center line on the RSI. You'll notice the last time that we consolidated, we never were able to cross below the center line on the RSI. Now we are still talking about a pullback on Sunday because there is some divergences up here, and we posted that to Patreon, which is down in the links in the description, as well as the course for 149. But this could pull back before we actually want to head higher. Shorter time frames are what we're going to go into on Sunday. Right now, I would look out because you could get some kind of divergence before that in Nvda earnings. Now, if we do see this drop off more dramatically and see some kind of, little 2 hour divergence, 4 hour divergence or something like that, and then we head higher with the earnings, we'll have to change our thinking a little bit. But right now, the probabilities are saying, hey, we took out this last week's high. Now we could start to head upward. Watch out, because something could really briefly take us up with maybe a short squeeze, and then we could see some kind of sudden drop. And we just heard from Warren Buffett, overpriced, geopolitical news, China, and recession are on his mind. AMD, this is more one to look at on the daily. Okay, so we're going to look at this on the daily, but just on the weekly, you can see it's been really beat up for quite some time. It went into our zone of the first real big set of buyers I say would step in. Now the daily scale here is what we're going to go over today, and I wanted to show you how on Friday we actually completed a divergence, and this is kind of the divergence that I want to see in the overall stock market. Okay, so if you're looking at this daily divergence, this is right here what we're looking for maybe on the weekly scale for a lot of these charts, just some kind of little divergence like this, and you're going to see, what are we doing? We're trying to fight out of this zone. Now the shorter time frames, maybe we do see some kind of little pullback to make a little bit stronger base here, but you do have that divergence on the 2 hour that could prove itself. You do have that divergence right here actually on the daily time frame between these lows at the same time. So you have to pay attention to that because it's on the MACD and RSI down here at the same time. And it's in a pretty significant direction, right? Coming up a little bit. Talk about that a lot in the course. But right now, what could we see? Well, we could be seeing a big reaction, some kind of big squeeze. This has been beat up for a long time. What would I pay attention to? First of all, the 50, but really I think we have a good shot of getting all the way up to something like 183.20. I think that would be a good rejection level, but first, we probably need to get through this point right here. I'm just seeing it right now, and I'm just saying, hey, these closing bars are adding up. This is where we really broke down from. So 165 could be all that's left in this move over the next few days. But if we're able to take that back, I would really start to think 183.20 is going to be the point to pay attention to. Now, what does that mean? Well, anytime we get to this point, or even 183.20, what do we want to pay attention to? When this daily is able to roll back down into negative territory, that is going to be your confirmation that, hey, we're probably going to test this low or go make a new one. Now, if that wants to extend for some time, we can start to talk about a higher low setting up, right? Something like that. But at this point, we have to say we're well into negative territory. So we first want to pay attention to how the call side can get damaged here. And that would be, hey, if we get some kind of squeeze, what if that just rejects, rolls back down into negative territory? That would not be a good sign for AMD. And most likely you could see this flush all the way down to this price point of 120. So just pay attention because yes, we could get that upward move. Don't get euphoric. Don't get overly bullish. Don't get overly bearish. We trade like water on this channel and we know that things can flip around very quickly. Stocks are going to do what they want to do and we just follow the price action and trade it accordingly. If this wants to roll over at any time, we're going to be seeing if it's in negative territory, and that will really tell us a lot about what's going to happen to AMD from this move forward. Now, Meta, we were talking about this pretty seriously on the shorter time frames, and this is the daily scale, and look at that, 453.08. It's what we've been mentioning over and over and over again. We're getting that retest as of Friday, so some resistance could come in. We'll talk about a pullback on Sunday, so make sure you're subscribed, but overall, this hasn't curled up on the MACD yet, which says, hey, I cannot make that big positive move. But if it's able to this week, we could be seeing some kind of big squeeze all the way up to a new high here between these points. I want to point that out. But you have a lot to fight through. First, you got to get above 453.08. Then you got to get through this level right here at about 480, right? We take back 480, we have a good shot of this being some kind of short squeeze and heading higher from here. I just want to pay attention to this on the weekly scale as well. Just looking at this, what do I see? No real divergences right by the center line here for the weekly scale. So if we do get a pullback, I just want to say I think that pullback will be brief, and then we could see this actually head higher as long as there's no news over this weekend. Now we want to pay attention to geopolitical stuff, right? Warren Buffett's paying attention to it, then I'm going to pay attention to it. The big thing for Meta, taking back the 20-week moving average. Now we can see if it gets rejection at the 5-week moving average, or if we're going to see this extend for some time and get some kind of high up here, and then we see sell in May and go away. Because right now you don't necessarily have divergences up here. Yes, you had it on the RSI, pretty steep here, and we were mentioning that a lot on the daily scale, but if this wants to roll up for a moment, right, just roll up for a moment and give us that little divergence like we're seeing on AMD, I think that is the signal we want to pay attention to going forward, because that would put us again into overbought territory and the momentum would be weak almost across the whole board for stocks like Meta, AMD, or Meta, Microsoft, Nvda, things like that. So we could be seeing some kind of upward move, but I'm telling you right now, if we make a big move here, the momentum is going to be very, very weak for a lot of stocks. Because I mentioned it, I'll talk about Microsoft real quick. And this was the flatness of the MACD and the RSI not necessarily proving this divergence here, this flatness. So this could still be a pullback on the weekly scale. What do? We go to the 20-week moving average. We see buyers step in multiple times here. We talked about this and we posted this trade to the Patreon because the 2-hour divergence here, it looks really good. And those like to roll up the daily. So what could we see from here? Let's get that little point of divergence. I actually think this will be very telling if Microsoft is able to make this upward move, because this is one that really looks like the momentum is dying out on the daily scale. We can go over that, but really you just want to pay attention. This weekly for the macro side is going to be important if we make this upward move, because we could see that ripped away very quickly. And if that starts to break through this structure here, well, then you might head a lot lower. And the first point I'd pay attention to is 338.02. So you're seeing Warren Buffett telling you, hey, things could head a lot lower. People are going to say, oh, he's wrong. If we get that squeeze, we go up towards 450, and then boom, Microsoft could be worth 338. very, very soon, maybe sometime this summer. So let's pay attention to the upward moves. We can trade those upward moves, but keep the macro in mind. And we trade like water on this channel for a reason. Yes, we could see an upward move, but then it might be followed by a bigger downward move soon. Why could we see an upward push? Well, volatility is starting to really pull back here. Volatility really starting to pull back. Looks like it could cross over and even go negative, but what if that is brief and we create that divergence here? Remember when I talk about the volatility and the SPY, and if you're trying to learn this stuff, first of all, the course is really going to help you out, and it's only $149 for today, and I might extend that just until Monday so you can ask questions about it live if you have questions. But right now, the weekly scale here dropping below all of the moving average, looking like it wants to roll down and go negative, which means we could get some kind of big push, and we could react down to 12.12. We could go to 13, but right now it looks like 12.12 might be the point where volatility can come back in, right? 12.12 is an area that we pay attention to a lot because that's where volatility usually comes back in. And that can extend for some time, but because of how the charts look across the board, you would say, oh, well, some kind of rip down or rip up in the market will lead to those divergences. And if those complete, it's not going to look the best. Now, I wanted to show you the volatility on the daily scale, and this is what you see when you get those big bull runs, when you get those big short squeezes. And I want to show you the last time we were talking about this. Okay, right here. So this point right here, the date is November 1st. This is where we were starting to talk about, oh, we could short squeeze, we could see a big bullish run because now we can react all the way down to 12.12. We said that all the way back on November 1st that we could target something like 12.12. So let's look at the stock market and see what was happening on November 1st and see if that was able to be a good point in order to get into this market. So let's see, November 1st was right here. Okay, so we're noticing if we just let that bar continue and then, or let that bar tell us what's up, and then the next day look at stocks, okay, boom, we see a big gap up the day after, and we start to squeeze over time. Okay, so that could be happening right now. There will be pullbacks in these moves, but as of right now, we could see, you know, some kind of brief pullback and then lead to that bullish run because we are seeing the signals that lead to some short squeezing here. Now we are going to go into the shorter time frames for all this. We're going to show you the volatility on these shorter time frames as well, because we're actually seeing some divergences here that could lead to some pullback on Sunday. So let's just pay attention to this going forward. First of all, though, it is very, very bullish what is happening for the VIX right now. Sure, it tried to cross up this 50 across the 200, which is a big crash signal if you can hold above it. But right now, starting to point back down. So we could see this want to base out and cross again in the future. And I'd be paying attention to any time this daily MACD starts to go positive. I think that is going to be a very, very telling moment that we're going to see some major volatility come into this market. So the main takeaway here is we are paying attention to the charts, but it is good to look at the insight of other investors such as Warren Buffett. He's been very, very successful. And if he thinks things are overpriced and he's selling his Apple stock in the first quarter of 2024, well, then is he buying right now or is he still waiting for those lower prices? So as of right now, we have to pay attention to that. We're also paying attention to geopolitical stuff. And at the same time, all this stuff at the same time just screams, hey, we could see an upward move. We could see some kind of squeeze, but be very careful if you start to see some downward signals, some dying out and momentum proven there, because we could see this all ripped away with some bad news and maybe even going into some kind of recession. So I just wanted to say, I hope you guys have a great weekend going forward. The course is going to be $149. I might extend that for a couple days just so you can ask about it live if you're new here. We go live every single morning. You can ask about the course. And I even set up a payment plan. So if you do, you don't want to put $200 into it or something like that, you can do $50 a month and that will cover it for you. So I really appreciate you guys coming by. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you dedicate it towards either having some fun or learning to try to get better, because you know, having some fun is good for your emotions before going into the market, and learning over the weekend is obviously going to be good for your strategies. But thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for liking and subscribing. I will see you back here on Sunday, and I hope you guys have a good weekend. Peace.